Good evening, dear readers, dear literary friends. Thank you everyone for your participation. In the name of the Embassy of the Republic of Slovenia in Tokyo, I am pleased to welcome you to today's dialogue session, a session with a highly acclaimed Slovenian author, playwright, and essayist representing Slovenian literature in Europe and in the world, Mr. Drago Jančar. His discussant will be Ms. Takako Kimura Ude, English, French, and Slovenian translator to Japanese language with profound knowledge of Jančar's literature. They will discuss Mr. Jančar's work, the world that inspires him, and of course, his book featured in the Europe Reader Digital Library, The Tree with No Name. Now, without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Mr. Jančar and Ms. Kimura Ude.
Hello, and hello, Mr. Jančar.
Hello.
It is a great honor for me to speak with you. I read your book. I saw her that night a few years ago, and it gave me a big impression. And I felt that finally I understood about the Slovenian history and society. So it is a great pleasure that we can introduce you to the Japanese audience and hopefully one day to have your books translated.
Thank you. It's a great honor to me too.
Thank you.
To be in that distant, beautiful country. We all know the country, but unfortunately, it's not easy to get there.
It is a bit far, yes. Yeah. So you were born in 1948 in Maribor,
yeah.
And you're a novelist and playwright and essayist, right?
Exactly.
Yes, and until now you have already written 11 novels, long novels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you have been acclaimed within Slovenia and internationally. So in 1993, you received the Prešeren Award, which is the Slovenian highest, most prestigious art award. And you received 4 times the Kresnik Award for the best novel of the year. And also internationally, in 2014, you received French Award for the best foreign novel, and you were nominated for the Femina Prize. And last year, in 2020, you got Austrian State Prize for European Literature for your lifetime achievement. And the theme of many of your books is struggle of powerless individual against the turbulent history and oppressive regime. So I have prepared a few questions to you, which is related to yourself and to the history of Slovenia. So the post-war Yugoslavia was considered more liberal than other East European countries with Stalinist regimes. And it was internationally acclaimed as going the third way. Nevertheless, it had a communist regime. When you were young, you were active in a student journal and you wrote articles, some of which were critical of the regime. And how did you start questioning the official ideology?
So I was young, I was a student. I was editor of a newspaper at university, of a student newspaper at the university in Maribor. And in these years, you know what is going to be, what somebody wants to be. And I was hesitating to be a writer, to be an artist, or to be involved in politics, to be an activist, to change the society, and many young people were dreaming or doing in ancient times and nowadays. But unfortunately, circumstances were not very convenient for me in that time. Actually, I was educated. I was born in a family. My father was a concentration camp. My family belonged to the resistance during the World War II, and I was in school educated in a socialistic way, etc. So that was my normal environment. But then I was young when I was 18, 19, 20. I wanted just more oxygen in the society. I felt that we are not exactly oppressed, but that we are living in the society where you cannot say whatever you want. So that was my first experience with my surrounding. And then I wrote an editorial. I was editor in culture and editor-in-chief of that small newspaper. It was not a big circulation, just at university. I wrote an editorial with the title for the Principle of Pluralism. I didn't want to overturn the socialist society. I didn't want to be, I just wanted as a young man more oxygen, more open debates, etc. But that was a storm. After that, my editorial that was published on the first page, because pluralism was many hats in that time, opposition, that was multi-party system, etc. I didn't think of this in that time at the beginning, but I was suddenly in front of the wall, in front of the school, that there were meeting of the Communist Party on the university, etc. And this newspaper was stopped, and I was no more. So that was my first experience, and I became a kind of a rebel, not the real dissident, but the kind of a rebel. And I was in the same time I started to write also. That my first short stories were published, etc. And I felt that I belong more to the art, to the literature than to the politics.
I see.
That was my beginning. And later I've got in troubles because my political opinions, but literature was for me always a solution and escape from this kind of life. If you mentioned Yugoslavia and Slovenia in part of this, Slovenia was in that time, Yugoslavia was at that time more free than other Eastern countries, because after broke with Tito, with Stalin, our borders were in 60s already open, and it was quite. I'm talking now about literature and art, etc. In this part of life, when literature is theater, etc., it was quite free. It was in free. We translated a lot. Everything what was in Europe at that time. Solzhenitsyn, for instance, who was completely prohibited in I don't know, in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, etc. In Yugoslavia was in the bookstore. So Yugoslavia was more open on the field of art, of literature, but not in the politics. If you wanted to establish an opposition party, or if you wanted to establish a political newspaper or something, then you got in troubles. I've got into troubles for a while, but doesn't matter. So such was the situation when I started.
I see. Yeah. And so you felt that after you wrote this article about pluralism, sort of political career was impossible for you.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So, but you don't regret your career afterwards. No?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that comes to my second question. Well, let me explain a bit about the background about Slovenian history during the Second World War. So it was an especially painful one. The country was occupied by the Germans and Italians, and there was resistance by the partisans who were dominated by the communists. And there was also Home Guard who collaborated with the Germans, and both sides were killing each other. After the war, the regime dominated by the partisans of Second World War, was established, and it ended after the death of Tito and the independence of Slovenia in 1991. So was writing a novel about World War II period in which Home Guard was not presented only negatively and as a taboo in Slovenia. Was it a taboo in Slovenia? And if so, when did you feel that the society was ready to accept books about that traumatic period and topic?
Our society is not yet or never has been ready for accept everything what happened during and after the World War II, because your description maybe to Japanese and other readers cannot say everything.
Yes,
because
it's simplified, of course.
Because it sounds complicated, but we can compare the situation to other European countries. We had for
Like
one side
Spanish
occupation, but inside the occupation there was a civil war on the part of Slovenian.
Yes.
And civil war is always the most terrible thing in Spain, in partly in Poland, and in Italy at the second part of the war, etc. And when civil war starts, it causes the wounds and the situation that you cannot heal in a short time. It entered into the families, into individual persons, etc. And this is one of the main topic of frustration and traumatic feelings and conflicts even in nowadays society. And in this book, you mentioned that that I am writing about this.
The tree with no name.
Is in the core of this is this situation. Slovenia was occupied partly by Germans, partly by Italians, the small part also with Hungarians. The resistance started, and at the beginning it was a liberation front, so-called communists were leading, but step by step communists took over. And at the end we had the revolution, we had a immediate dictatorship. In first year, the communist dictatorship was quite tough. Later it was easier, as I explained before, always in 60s and 70s, it was much easier to be. But this topic about what happened during the war, in the civil war and after the war, that was taboo. That's a taboo. And so when this book was published, society was always ready to accept this kind of literary explanation,
descriptions.
Still not the whole political situation, because it's a matter also of historians, of a political debates, etc. But through the literature, because we are talking about individuals, because families, love, hatred, etc. It's maybe some
personal
things easier to understand.
Yes, I see. So this book, The Tree with No Name, that we'll talk about later, it was published in 2008, was it? Around
I think so, yes.
Yes. So it was still beginning of opening up to this topic. Yes, I see. Okay. And another of your novels, I Saw Her That Night. This is one of the most successful internationally, and it was recently made into a theater piece by co-production of Maribor Theater, Cankarjev Dom of Ljubljana, Belgrade National Theater, and Burg Theater of Austria. And I had the chance to watch it a few years ago in Maribor, and it was a 4 hours presentation, but it was very intense and experience. And well, towards the end, things were unfolding in very rapid succession. So the attention was being built up, and I didn't feel that 4 hours were passing. It was very interesting. And I'm very sorry that it would be difficult to bring this piece elsewhere, because the actors are speaking in 3 languages, so Slovenian, German, and Serbian. So maybe translation would be difficult. And so I felt, when reading the book, The Tree with No Name, I felt also that this rapid building up rhythm and mounting tension was also there in the book. So do you think your experience as a playwright influenced your novels?
I don't know, how did you survive 4 hours?
I enjoyed it.
There were 2 intermissions.
Yes.
So it was
much
possible.
better than me.
I saw it also, but, and I thought that the audience liked it.
Yes.
It was
exceptional.
Thank you. So my experience with playwriting is also quite along. I started with prose, and later I wrote some theater plays. But this book was this is an adaptation of the novel that you have mentioned. By the way, this novel was really translated in many languages, and I was surprised because, for instance, in France, I was awarded, if I can say, by
as the best foreign book. Yes,
but I was really surprised because it's Slovenian topic. I'm talking about one very, I would say, very particular story. But this story is suddenly we realize that it's universal.
Yes, exactly.
That for French audience or German audience or Lithuanian or I don't know is somehow familiar, of course, because we are talking about individuals who are suddenly in the storm of unbelievable events of World War II.
Exactly.
Yes, all around Europe, also in Japan, in Asia, etc. And so, of course, this is part of, I think something in my prose writing is also some tensions inside are dramatic, is my experience from both sides, from writing novel, writing plays are mixing on some point. You cannot
it's not conscious.
Of course, this is a different method how to write, but if I want to make some little more tense and interesting for reader, I must have some elements of play also inside. And thank you that you have mentioned this. This is also connected to World War II. I'm not writing only about World War II. But
they happen to be.
These two novels had the big echo, not only in Slovenia, but also. I thought it's just a history, not for me. I am trying to go deeper in human existence about during this period. But mostly people say, "Oh, it's happened sometime," and who cares?
It's not about country. Yes.
But there are readers, there are inquisitive readers who wants to learn and who feel people who were innocent or who were against their will involved in a terrible historical events.
Yes, it was really powerful things. Yes. Okay. So in Yugoslavia, there were 4 official languages, including Slovenian. So I believe you're sort of used to the fact that your works are being translated. And of course, within Yugoslavia, each republic had more or less shared history and culture. And now with your novel, I Saw Her That Night, which is the most successful internationally, I hear that it was translated into over 25 languages, and the most recent ones into Lithuanian and Arabic.
Yes.
Yes. So I hope one day Japanese will join there. Yes. So what is your feeling about your work being translated into languages outside of Central Europe, where the readers do not have the knowledge about this history and culture?
At the beginning, in the time of Yugoslavia, I had already quite translations, especially inside of Yugoslavia. Yes. I don't know how one Japanese reader or well culturally educated man even understand this mixture of nations and cultures.
Maybe only on the surface, but into depth.
If we start to explain, it will be a long story. Yes. From south to the north, where Slovenia is very much Central European, between Vienna and Venice, and now south is to the Thessaloniki, to the Greek border. It's and there were 3 religions: Catholic, Orthodox, and Muslim. Many languages, etc. But that was interesting mixture to living in. somehow I miss that mixture, yes,
now.
from cultural way. I never miss dictatorship and that iconographic of our Marshal Tito, etc. When I was educated in schools, etc. I don't miss this because it was a dictatorship with a big leader.
Yes, in the society.
Yes. Now everybody, many people understand. Some people feel nostalgia for that time, but I feel nostalgia for a mixture of a culture. Diversity was interesting. My books were already in Yugoslavian times. After there was no more anathema on my work. When it was open, my books were in Belgrade, in Skopje, in Zagreb, etc. So, and I had friends everywhere. But then this unfortunate war started in Yugoslavia.
In the 90s.
Break up Slovenia, Croatia, and terrible war in Bosnia, etc. And our ties, our connections were weaker and weaker, but still I have it. So I miss that mixture of cultures, but I don't miss the dictatorship and one-sided thinking, etc. So I am double-minded about this.
I see. Yeah. Good point and bad point.
Yes, but of course, I would never, if Yugoslavia was in that time somehow democratic society, maybe it wouldn't happen what happened here, because we would have a parliament to discuss the problems. We had a parliament formally, of course, with one party. But for instance, Belgium, they have two nations, they have conflicts, even on the streets sometimes. They had no government one whole year, but finally they debate this in parliament.
Yes.
We didn't have that possibility. So
one party decided
one of the reasons why everybody is asking why Yugoslavia, they asked me very often why Yugoslavia was destroyed, and because it was dictatorship. That is my answer. If you have even a weak parliamentarian system, then you can debate, you can have a dialogue, etc. We didn't have this, and the main word was had the army and Communist Party, etc. It didn't work, and there were no more solution for this big, interesting, cultural, interesting country.
I see.
Yeah.
And do you still feel some special, well, how shall I say, bond or special affinity towards other former Yugoslavian countries?
Sorry?
Like Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia. They're a bit special for you compared to other
there is, yes, but I still travel there. They still publish my books there. During the war, I was in Sarajevo with some friends, some member of International PEN, because we collected some money. International PEN, that's not only in Slovenia, but they believe that we from Slovenia, who are close to this area, we were already out of the war at that time.
Yes.
They believe that we can help our writers who were sieged in Sarajevo.
Writers of Sarajevo.
Yes, and we traveled in Sarajevo in the war for a few days. So, and they accepted us very nice there. We gave them money. They were, but my experience was terrible because buildings were destroyed. I was living in that famous Holiday Inn hotel in Sarajevo without windows, etc., because every advert was still destroyed. So that experience was not very nice. But we got that. We brought that money there, and we had some even literary evening.
I see.
Some drinking with friends and so.
Oh, that's nice. I see. Okay, now. I would like to speak a bit about the Tree with No Name. This is the theme book of the event, I think. So
this is Slovenian edition.
Slovenian.
It's maybe more attractive.
Maybe more colorful.
More colorful.
Yes. So the book speaks about archivist from 21st century who discovers historical documents from the wartime and tries to discover their owners, identities, and fates from the wartime. So this book actually is available online from Europe Reader Digital Library, which is organized by the network of the European Union National Institutes for Culture under the initiative of the Slovenian presidency of the EU Council. It is available free of charge, both in English and Slovenian versions until the end of the year. You can find a link to the Europe Reader Digital Library towards the end of the webpage of European Literature Festival. Okay, now, so after the end of the Second World War, victorious partisans proceeded to take revenge, and Home Guards and German sympathizers were executed without trial. I feel that even after 80 years, Slovenian society is still divided and wounded by this experience. In this novel, you describe the atrocities committed by both sides. I especially found the cry of one partisan. As soon as I stopped thinking of them as traitors, I don't understand why we had killed them. This is a very powerful and distressing word, and symbolizing the whole tragedy. Current society is also very much divided economically, and also because of the people's attitude to pandemic. And your another novel, The Galley Slave, is set in Europe in the Middle Age in the time of plague. So it's there's a bit of common point there. Maybe you can explain to the Japanese audience about the situation in Slovenia concerning the COVID-19. And do you see here some similarities with historical situation? And what would be your suggestion to address this divide of the society?
It's an interesting question. Actually, these are two questions in one, but there is a connection. There is a connection, I see. About first part of the question, it is the most sensitive topic in Slovenia after 1990. Till 1990, it was taboo. There was not talking a lot of this. Books about this, events after World War II, and even some events during the World War II were prohibited and they were not allowed, etc. But after 1990, this debate was open. It starts quite well with the attempt to understand both sides in the civil war. But later on, with the political development, these things were more and more complicated instead of less complicated. So the society didn't find the way for a kind of reconciliation, for understanding each other. So I lost somehow hope that the political, even historians, can solve the problem. And this is maybe why I decided to do it by novel, because literature can understand
it has its
the
own
hero,
power.
the traitor, the somebody who was innocent, somebody who was involved, etc. And I believe literature has a language to approach the human heart, human mind.
Yes, more close to heart.
Yes, close to heart. So, and maybe after that, you can start again some rational, some political, some historical debate. Because what they are debating nowadays is only one was traitor, another was killer, the third one was liquidator, etc., etc. Only ugly labeling. Labeling after labeling. So there is no way out in this way.
Yes.
As I mentioned before, it's not only Slovenian. Maybe at us it is more tough because we are a small society, we know each other, etc. And families who were involved. Everybody has, there are many families in Slovenia who were on the both sides. One son was by partisans, another was by home guards, etc. In my part of Slovenia, where there were no home guards, there were just Germans and partisans, but also Germans had some Slovenian collaborators, etc. So
very complicated.
It's complicated, but literature, I think, can somehow try to understand this and overcome this situation. And then you mentioned pandemic.
Yes.
Yes, in this strange pandemic situation, when people are nervous, when they don't, many of them, they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel of this virus and everything on what's going on around him. They're behaving like in this war sometimes, you know.
Blaming the others.
Yes, always blaming the others.
Yes.
And there is no solution again. So it's for people, for politicians, for historians, for writers, for intellectuals, for all of us, it's very hard task to explain that we are living together, that we must tolerate each other, that we must find a common solution. And I hope it happens. Sometimes I am a little pessimistic because you mentioned that I wrote a historical novel with the title The Galley Slave.
Yes.
The Galley Slave is a novel which is taking place in Europe and taking in 17th century in time of plague. I wrote this novel when I was quite young. I started when I was 24 and it was published when I was 26. And I thought that these kind of things are mostly or only in historical and literary books. The pandemic.
Yes, we didn't.
I forgot to say that it's about plague. It's about plague. My hero, Johann Otis, his name, is on the run. He's fleeing from Inquisition because he's heretic in that time. But he entered in the pandemic of a plague from that time. And when I now read some sentences that I wrote, it's like today. It sounds like today you have weird people who had an unbelievable explanation of a plague. I can understand for 17th century, it's not easy to understand for 21st century with all this science and technology and everything. And rumors were spreading around what's going on, some unbelievable things. But nowadays, when we have a internet, globalization, all information about technology, against rumors who are faster, can be spread through internet, etc. But the same strange, unbelievable rumors and theories of a plot is circulating around and making people more nervous. I am writing in that novel from the 17th century about demonstrations on the streets.
Oh, like now, really?
We have all of this. I don't think that the history is repeating itself on the same way, but I'm afraid that we didn't change enough.
Not as much as we
if we have now suddenly all this information, all knowledge, and we are behaving the same way like the people in 17th century.
I see.
This is for me as a writer strange
and sad.
Yes, and sad somehow. Yes.
Yes, I see. Okay. So while reading the book, The Tree with No Name, I was a bit surprised to find one Japanese word, skebe, which means dirty old man. And how did you come across this word? And what is your image of Japan? Of Japan.
Of Japan, it's not an easy question. Japan is so well known. So well known. Everybody thinks that know Japan. In the morning, I drink Japan tea.
Oh, really?
I did
Green tea?
tomorrow every morning. I did it today too.
I see.
That's it. My first information in the morning.
I see. Start with Japan. That's nice.
I've read Japanese writers. I don't know if I pronounce the name. This is the problem. Haruki Murakami.
Haruki Murakami.
Murakami, yes.
Yes.
Oe, of course.
Oe Kenzaburo. Yes.
Yeah, and others. I've read them. They're well known. They're famous all around the world. I've read something in English, but there are also many translations in the Slovenian language. In last time, there are many translations. Some women writers also, etc. This is my professional approach. Of course, Japan history. I'm interested in history. In one part of history, in World War II, you had some. We
also had
similar problems that you can. We were not imperialistic country. Never. It couldn't. It was history saved us from this because we are small. But Japan have this terrible problem, and you are still. I think Japan is still facing also with the history.
We have consequences, like in your society,
in other countries, and what happened in China itself, etc. I believe that you have a similar problem. This is part of this. Of course, this is then a huge information about beauty of
its culture,
painting, of a countryside, of food, of everything. So Japan is not unfamiliar country to Slovenians from Europeans, etc. And there are also many close ties. And maybe it's cliche, but how Japan is successful, how trains are
fast train
to the coming to the point, etc. How great industry, technology, etc. These are not only cliches. This is the reality that we are living in. So I was the closest place to the Japan. I was South Korea.
Almost. So I hope you'll have occasion to go visit our country.
These days, opportunity.
Yes. And the main character of this book, The Tree with No Name, his name, Janus Lipnik. He's an archivist who digs into the past records and discovers details of the past history. And his father survived concentration camp, and his erratic behavior back home has troubling effect on him. You said that your father was also in concentration camp. And so Janus Lipnik is also very meticulous on his research and refuses to give up midway without going to the bottom of his research. As a novelist writing about historical period, how much do you identify yourself with this man? And do you sometimes feel a strong pull to a certain period of time or certain person?
I actually identified myself with every hero that I'm writing. Also,
I see.
Also with women. Also, as you probably know, Flaubert, French author, said, Flaubert. Madame Bovary, c'est moi.
Yes.
I am Madame Bovary.
Yes.
And I must be everybody. I must be the hero and the traitor and the killer. And
probably to write psychological depth.
Yes, if I want to write about this, I must be for a while in the skin and the brain of every hero. It's not just some cliche or something, it's the reality. If you want to convince your writer, you must believe in also in evil heroes. If you read Dostoevsky, a Russian writer, he was part of all these terrible people like Karamazov and others, etc. And if you read Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, by the way, Anna Karenina was the real person, as the real person is in the novel you have mentioned before. I saw her that night.
Yes,
the real person. But when you write, it's something else. It's you also in this. So I can identify identified partly with that archivist, how he is going more and more deep in history and more deep in his own subconscious and his soul. And one German critic, one reviewer, she wrote that, yes, please write this novel. It's not an easy reading, it's dangerous reading. But please, she wrote a warning. Reading this novel, the earth under your feet can slip away.
Really?
Yes. So if you look to do it deep in the, it's also the warning for us, for the talk that we had before.
Yes.
If we must not look too deep in the history.
Yes.
We must try to understand, but not digging and digging.
Caught into it. Yes, I see. Yes. So I was thinking to ask you, what is the message for you that history should not be forgotten, or that at certain point we should let go of it? So you think we shouldn't go too deep into history, but at certain point go on with your life.
Exactly.
Yes, I see. Okay, one last question. So Slovenia has very beautiful nature. It is called Green Gem of Europe, with rich forest and water and so on. But when you go visiting, then you notice many monuments dedicated to fallen partisans. And in this book, the forest is connected to the struggle between partisans and the home guards. And water, river is massacred, bodies discovered, and underground caves where bodies were dumped. And so after learning about this gruesome history, I remembered one Japanese saying, under beautiful cherry blossom lies a dead body, we say.
It's a beautiful and strange saying.
Something beautiful is covering something horrible.
Very literary,
Yes. And also trees are playing an important role in this book. First of all, of course, the title, The Tree with No Name. And the main character from 21st century climbs a huge tree with no name, and lands in the year 1943. Also, cherry tree and oak play important role in the history. And of course, the main character's name, Lipnik, I think it comes from lipa, which means in Slovenian, lime tree, and the symbol of Slovenia. So do you think the Slovenian nature in some way affected your literature? And what does the tree without name symbolize?
That the Japanese saying you mentioned is beautiful and terrible.
Yes, it is.
Inside, it's great literary metaphor also for this book. I would say it could be for this book. Yes, it's a beautiful landscape, rose, and under the earth there are
some terrible things hiding.
Excavated bodies and bones, etc. Slovenia, if you travel, you know, from Slovenia already here for some time here.
Yes.
If you travel from this area, from Ljubljana to Trieste, from Alpine area to the Adriatic Sea, you will feel that something is wrong with the earth. It's like a hollow there. No, in reality, it is a geographical phenomenon.
The caves in karstic
this
region.
is so-called karst. And under the earth, we have rivers there, fleas there. We have meanders of rivers. We have lakes under the earth.
Very unique.
And this is for me similar metaphor that you used from Japanese.
I see.
This is for me the metaphor for Slovenian history, new Slovenian history. We have beautiful earth, and this is also in the book that under the shopping centers and beautiful earth there is something else behind.
Yes, there was some attic,
not behind,
torture,
under there invisible river, and this is the Slovenian history. And when we will be aware about, as we are geographically, it's still not discovered everything in geography, by the way, yes, because it's strange. When we will, in symbolical way, metaphorical way, when we will understand and taking our conscious, knowing and believing that there is also another world that we don't know, like your flower and the body,
yes,
then we will be a full normal nation. You know?
I see. It will
Everybody,
take time.
and it's not only Slovenian problem, it's Japanese problem, it's a Spanish problem.
Yes, each country has its own issue.
That's why literature could be universal, not only national or local.
Yes. So yes,
I'm just illustrating with the local geographical phenomenon. Yes.
But the theme is universal. Yes. Yes, so I really hope that we will be able to read in our language, Japanese, your novels in the near future. So I think our time is up. So thank you very much for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you for interesting question and understanding of my country. And because from first point of view, it's only touristically interesting.
For the beginning.
We are proud of our beautiful landscape, as you mentioned, but it's a country with a deep history, problems, believing, love, hatred. And I felt that you entered a little deeper in our country.
Thanks to your literature, I discovered the depths. Okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yanczer and Ms. Kimura Ude, for this insightful dialogue full of deep thoughts that made us all think about the history and the present, and of course to help us understand Mr. Yanczer's background as a writer. So I too hope that more and more Japanese will get interested in your work, and that one day we will be able to find one of your works on Japanese bookshelves as well. Lastly, I would like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Slovenia for providing our discussions with this beautiful space. Also, last but not least, of course, I would like to thank the organizers of this literature festival, the delegation of the European Union in Tokyo. And one more thing, so already Ms. Kimura Ude mentioned it, but I kindly invite you all to our digital library, Europe Reader. You can access it on www.europereader.eu, www.europereadr without an E, .eu, where you can find Mr. Yanczer's book, The Three with No Name, and 26 other European literature works. So once again, thank you all for participating, and happy reading. Thank you.